in the shadowy corners of ancient history and theology. Certain names echo with a mixture of fear, fascination, and mystery. Among them is one that has survived through centuries of retelling: Beelzebub, often called the Lord of the Flies. For some, he is remembered as nothing more than a slanderous insult invented by the ancient Israelites. For others, he stands as one of the most dangerous demons ever conceived, a prince of hell, second only to Lucifer himself. But how did this mysterious figure evolve from a Canaanite god worshipped in ancient cities, to the adversary of prophets in the Hebrew Bible, to eventually becoming one of the most feared demons of Christianity and demonology? To answer this, we must travel through ancient lands, biblical stories, and medieval imagination to uncover the strange journey of Beelzebub, the Philistines, and the pagan gods of Canaan. Our story begins in the lands of Canaan, on the southern coast where the Philistines once lived. The Philistines were an ancient people, often in direct conflict with the Israelites. Biblical accounts frequently portray them as enemies of God's chosen people, not only because of military conflicts, but also because of their devotion to what were called pagan gods. One of these gods was Baal, a name that appears repeatedly throughout the Old Testament. Baal was a widely worshipped deity in the ancient Near East, a god associated with fertility, storms, and power. Queen Jezebel, when she married King Ahab of Israel, brought with her devotion to Baal, encouraging his worship in the northern kingdom. This sparked one of the Bible's most famous confrontations, the prophet Elijah versus the prophets of Baal atop Mount Carmel. There, Elijah challenged Baal to prove his power by igniting a sacrifice. The god remained silent, while the God of Israel answered Elijah with fire from heaven, humiliating Baal's prophets. From stories such as these, Baal became a symbol of opposition to Yahweh, and his name would take on darker connotations in later traditions. From Baal to Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. Transformation from Baal to Beelzebub begins in the city of Ekron, a Philistine stronghold. In the book of 2 Kings, we are introduced to King Ahaziah of Israel, who suffers a severe injury after falling through a lattice. Rather than turning to the God of Israel for help, Ahaziah sends his messengers to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, to learn whether he would recover. This decision angers the God of Israel. He sends Elijah to intercept the messengers with a cutting question. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going off to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Elijah warns that because of Ahaziah's unfaithfulness, he will never rise from his bed but will surely die. The prophecy is fulfilled, and Ahaziah perishes without an heir. In this account, Beelzebub is explicitly identified as the god of Ekron, worshipped by the Philistines. But the name itself is curious. Some scholars believe Beelzebub means Lord of the Flies, a mocking corruption of Beelzebul, which would have meant exalted Lord, by twisting the name into something associated with filth and insects. The Israelites may have been deliberately insulting both the god and his worshippers. Thus, Beelzebub begins his long journey not as a great demon, but as a foreign god mocked and despised by the Israelites. Beelzebub in Jewish thought over time. Beelzebub's reputation grew darker. Jewish tradition often portrayed foreign gods not merely as rivals, but as demonic beings in disguise. This idea developed especially during the intertestamental period, when influences from Babylonian and Persian religions shaped Jewish demonology. Some Jewish writings describe Beelzebub as not only the Lord of the Flies, but also as a god of filth and decay, surrounded by swarms of insects. In this way, Beelzebub became less of a legitimate god and more of a symbol of corruption, impurity, and death. By the time of the New Testament, the name had already taken on a demonic quality, no longer the title of a pagan god, but a sinister power aligned against the work of God. Beelzebub in the Gospels. Gospels provide one of the most significant turning points in Beelzebub's identity. In the book of Matthew, chapter 12, Jesus heals a man who was possessed by a demon, leaving the crowd in awe. But the Pharisees, religious leaders who opposed him, were not impressed. They accused Jesus of performing these miracles not by the power of God, but by the power of Beelzebub, the prince of demons. Their accusation was simple but cutting. If Jesus could cast out demons, it was only because he was working with the greatest demon of them all. But Jesus responds with brilliant logic. Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined. If Satan drives out Satan, how can his kingdom stand? He challenges their reasoning, pointing out that if Beelzebub were helping him, it would mean demons were destroying their own work. Instead, Jesus insists that his power comes from the Spirit of God, proving that the kingdom of God had come among them. This confrontation cements Beelzebub's reputation in Christian thought. He is not merely a Philistine deity. He is the prince of demons, second only to Satan, and the very name invoked by those who wanted to discredit Jesus. Beelzebub in apocryphal writings, the testament of Solomon beyond the canonical scriptures. Beelzebub also appears in apocryphal texts, the most famous being the Testament of Solomon, a pseudepigraphal work that explores how King Solomon used a magical ring to command demons. In this tale, Solomon summons Beelzebub himself, who declares, "I am Beelzebub, the prince of demons, and I sit upon the throne of all unclean spirits." He describes his power to corrupt kings, incite wars, and tempt humanity into sin. He admits that he delights in sowing envy, stirring murder, and spreading lust. He even claims that he was once a high-ranking angel in heaven before his fall, now ruling over legions of spirits in TAR-US. Solomon, using his magical ring, forces Beelzebub into servitude, commanding him to cut marble for the construction of the temple. Though not part of biblical canon, this story is remarkably it transforms Beelzebub from an insult or accusation into a fully fleshed out demonic personality with his own motives, history, and weaknesses. Beelzebub in medieval demonology. By the Middle Ages, Beelzebub had become firmly entrenched in Christian demonology. Writers like Peter Binsfeld, who classified demons according to the 7 deadly sins, identified Beelzebub as the embodiment of gluttony. Others, however, saw him as representing envy. These classifications were not always consistent, but they reflected the growing tendency to systematize hell, giving demons specific roles and identities. In some traditions, Beelzebub was described as just beneath Lucifer himself, Prince of Hell, commanding countless legions of demons. In others, he was part of a demonic trinity with Lucifer and Leviathan, together forming the 3 great rulers of the infernal kingdom. French Inquisitor Sebastian Michaelis, writing in the 17th century, claimed during an exorcism that Beelzebub had once been a mighty seraphim, the highest order of angels, before falling from heaven alongside Lucifer. Such claims reinforced the idea that Beelzebub was not a minor demon, but a cosmic power with terrifying authority. Beelzebub in literature and culture beyond theology. Beelzebub captured the imagination of writers and poets. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, Beelzebub appears as one of the leading figures of hell, second only to Lucifer. Together, they plot their rebellion against God and the corruption of mankind. Later literature, such as Goethe's Faust and countless occult writings, also feature Beelzebub as a central figure in the demonic hierarchy. Over time, his name became almost interchangeable with Satan himself, or at least one of his closest allies. Even in modern times, Beelzebub continues to fascinate. From horror films to novels, the name carries with it an aura of dread, mystery, and ancient evil. Interpretations of the name Lord of the Flies. The title, Lord of the Flies, remains one of Beelzebub's most distinctive features. Some scholars argue that it was simply a Hebrew insult, mocking the Philistine god by associating him with dung and flies. Others see a deeper symbolism. Flies represent decay, corruption, and death, perfectly suited to a demon who thrives on destruction in later Christian imagination. The swarms of flies became metaphors for demons themselves, creatures that gather where corruption festers, servants of a prince who rules over all that is filthy and impure. Beelzebub, Prince of Hell, or insulting nickname. The mystery of Beelzebub lies in his dual identity. Was he truly a cosmic power, a fallen angel who commands legions of demons? Or was he simply a slanderous nickname invented by Israelites to mock their enemies' gods? The answer may lie somewhere in between. What began as an insult, Lord of the Flies, slowly evolved through centuries of storytelling, theology, and demonology into a towering figure of evil. Whether as the god of the prince of demons in the Gospels, or the marble-cutting servant of Solomon, Beelzebub became a canvas upon which generations painted their fears about idolatry, sin, and the power of darkness. Conclusion: from the temples of Ekron to the courts of King Solomon, from the debates of Pharisees to the visions of medieval Beelzebub has journeyed far across history and belief. At times, he has been a mocking insult, at others, a rival god, and still, at others, the terrifying Prince of Hell, second only to Lucifer. Yet no matter the interpretation, Beelzebub endures as a symbol of mankind's struggle to define the powers of good and evil, purity and corruption, faith and blasphemy. Even today, his name stirs curiosity and unease, reminding us that stories of demons are never just about the supernatural. They are about the fears, rivalries, and beliefs of the people who told them so. The next time you hear the name Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies, the long and strange journey that carried him from the pagan temples of Canaan to the fiery